So welcome to Badass Soul Session number 3. Today we're going to be talking about fear and this idea of widening the gap between when a desire bubbles up and when fear then bubbles up, and often then there is a shutdown. Your mind takes over and shuts down the desire, or goes into fear and goes into this place of trying to kind of contain you and not allow you to feel the desire, and you start to second guess yourself. So first of all, just notice, just even think about in the last week how often you have had a fear bubble up, a fear that has either kept you from doing something that you really want to do, or a fear that has held you back in some way or squelched a desire. And I just want you to bring that to your attention. Like, how many times this week has it happened? And when does your fear tend to bubble up? Because all of us have it. Our fear is never going to go away. That's always going to be an emotion that tries to keep us safe, that tries to keep us out of harm. It is our ego's way of keeping us in our comfort zone and making sure that we don't make any stupid mistakes, so to speak. And so that fear is always going to be coming up. And especially if you are a person who wants to have a big impact in your life, or a person that wants to continue growing spiritually, emotionally, developmentally, then that requires taking risk on a fairly regular basis if we want to be doing that. And any time that we are taking a risk, fear is going to be involved. Very rarely are we stepping outside of our comfort zone and taking a risk where fear doesn't bubble up. It just doesn't happen. And so today I really want to speak about how do we start really working with the fear when it does come up, because it's going to. How do we start working with it so we begin to widen the gap between when the fear when the desire starts to bubble up, you start thinking about like the home, your dream home, or you start thinking about the multiple six-figure business that you want, or you start to think about what would it be like to quit my job and start my own business, or you start to think about that vacation that you really desire. And that desire starts to come up, and automatically kind of the pattern that happens is the desire starts to bubble up, and you start to get excited and you think, oh my God, I can totally do it. It's going to be amazing. Like I can't wait to do blah, blah, blah. And then automatically the mind starts to come on board, and all of these, like a sequence of usually like, oh, I'm not smart enough, or I'm not good enough, or I don't have enough technology skill, or I don't have enough money in my bank account, or how am I going to get from where I am now all the way to there? Those things start bubbling up, and then bam, the shutdown happens. And the desire goes away or starts to get reduced. And then you start moving back down the emotional scale. And so then maybe you start to not go after that thing that you really want. So drop something in the comments, drop a 1 in the comments if that has happened to you, even in the last week, the last month, where you have felt a desire start to bubble up, or something that you really want or that you get really excited about, and then all of the, like some kind of logistical information starts pouring into your mind, and you cut off the flow. You cut off the desire because you go into this place of, oh my God, how am I going to do that from where I am now? Or I can't, or that seems impossible. So when that starts to happen, thanks, Kevin, awesome. So when that starts to happen, when that kind of immediate pattern starts to happen, one of the things that we can do is to try to go back into the desire. So when we are tapped into our desire, that is literally source speaking through us. That is source speaking through you. That is when you are connected and aligned to your higher self. That is when you are connected to your higher self. And so the more that we can try to stay in that place of being connected to the desire and try to turn down the volume on the ego that's telling us that we can't, or that we don't have enough time, or that we don't have enough money in our bank account, the more that we are going to be able to attract that into our lives and really start to make that happen. So when we are going into the place of I can't or I don't have enough, that is only related to us being connected to two things. Either our past experiences, our past self, because in the past maybe we have literal experiences where we failed at that thing, or we actually don't have enough money in our bank account, or somebody told us that we weren't smart enough at some point, or somebody told us that we weren't good enough. And so we attach ourselves to that past part of ourselves, to that past experience, and that tells us that we can't have what we want. Or we are thinking about the future, about like we are 20,000 steps ahead of ourselves and thinking about all of the things that could go wrong, or all the steps that we have to take in order to reach that desire. And so either way, whether it's us being connected to our past or us worrying about far, far, far in advance in our future, it disconnects us from our desire and it narrows that gap. And so we immediately feel the desire, and then either the past experiences or the future worries come in, and it like shuts us down immediately from our desires. And so I want you to just take a second, even now, and just think about maybe one thing in recently that has come up that you have had a desire bubble up and that you have shut down, either because of an experience you've had in a past or a story that you have of your past, or thinking about the future, and just hold that in your awareness a moment. And Margie, I want to read your comment. I'll come back to it in a minute. So just think of that one thing maybe that's happened recently. And instead of going to the past of like why it can't happen, or going to the future about why it can't possibly happen, I want you to just see if you can sit in the desire of it. So hold that one thing in your mind's eye that you really are desiring, whether it's something for it can be something small. It doesn't have to be something gigantic. And just hold that in your awareness and see if you can just hold that desire. And just notice what it feels like in your body when you start thinking about sitting on that boat in Greece, or thinking about what it's going to be like to be standing on stage speaking in front of 100 people, or having a really great relationship with your kid, or having a great relationship with your partner. And just notice how quickly what might want to happen is that shutdown. And so the first piece of working with fear is to widen that gap. So to have the awareness of when that shutdown wants to come in, that past experience, that past part of yourself, or the future worry about all the steps that have to take place. And just see if you can just come back to the desire. So this is a huge practice with fear, because again, fear is always going to keep happening. So the practice is noticing when the desire bubbles up and seeing how long you can literally just seep in the desire, rather than going to the shutdown, going into the like logical mind or the ego mind. So when I was in I think it was like my late 20s, I moved to Santa Fe, New Mexico in order to help run a service dog organization there. And when I first moved there, I knew nobody there. And so the owner, the executive director of the organization had a friend who had a home there that allowed me to like move into their second home for a little while until I kind of got my bearings and just landed in Santa Fe. And it was a relatively small house, and it didn't have a fenced yard, and I had my 2 dogs, and then I also had 2 service dogs that I was taking care of as well and training. And, you know, after being there for a number of months, I knew that I needed to like find a place to really land. Like I needed a bigger yard because I needed to have more dogs living with me that I was training. And so I went on this search. I like had this vision in my mind of exactly the house that I wanted. And I wanted to be able to have dogs there, but I also wanted to be able to have a horse on my property in Santa Fe. And so I hired a real estate agent and I started looking around for houses, and at the beginning I saw a number of houses and nothing kind of quite fit the bill for me. And I kept just visualizing and imagining this perfect house, and pretty quickly at the beginning of the process, and maybe a couple of months in, my real estate agent came to me and she said, I have found an interesting property. And it might not be exactly what you imagined, but I think that you should just take a look at it. And so I was like, sure, I'm totally open to whatever. So we went to this property, and it was a barn. It was on 5 acres, and there was pine trees everywhere, and it had a riding arena. But it was a barn. It wasn't a house. And so I was still totally open. And I went inside, and it was amazing. And it was actually originally developed to be a house at some point. So like the bones of the house, the structure of the building was all there. It didn't need to be like knocked down or insulation put in. Like it was built to be a house at some point. So as soon as I saw it, I knew that this was where I was supposed to be living. I knew that this was my property. And I got so excited, and I was just imagining a million things that I could do with this house. And then almost within 5 minutes, shut down. I started thinking about I'm just in my late 20s. I'd have to find a builder, and I'd have to find everything to put in it. And I went on this rampage of all of the things that I would have to do in order to actually make it a house. And instantly the desire started to go away. And so even at that time, I knew that was not where I wanted to be. I knew I still deeply knew that was the house that I was supposed to be in, and that was the land that I was supposed to be on. And so I left that property that day, and I noticed the shutdown, and I kept going back to the desire. I kept it came to me in my dreams. I kept thinking about it all the time, this house and what it could be and all of these things. And the biggest piece was I don't know anybody in town. How could I find even a builder? I don't even know where to start with that. And how am I going to find the money to do that? And so about 3 weeks later, my real estate agent came to me and said, I have this friend of mine who's a builder, and he loves the idea of turning this barn into a house, and he's willing to do it for cost. And so the desire started to bubble up even more. So I ended up buying this house, and the builder came and did the demo, and then he took off. Literally, the demo was done. So I owned this house, I owned this property, and I had the demo done, and then my builder completely disappeared off the face of the planet, didn't return a phone call. And I was like, holy shit. I'm in my late 20s. I own a house and a 5-acre property, and I have a house that has nothing inside of it, and now everything is demolished inside of it, including the doors taken down. And so of course the shutdown came again, I lost it, and the fear came up like crazy. And then I remembered again, there was something that I just knew about coming back to the desire. Yes, Kevin. Oh no. Like, I was like, holy shit. And I came back to the desire, and I kept saying to myself, I'm going to find the perfect person to build this house. I'm going to find the perfect person to build this house. They are on their way. And about 3 months later, I had started dating this man, and he actually did construction and built things, but he worked full time, so it didn't even cross my awareness. And he knew, like, I'm having this conversation about my actual builder taking off and leaving. And he said, what if I quit my job and built your house? And I was like, really? What? Like, okay. So I had no idea at that time. Like, I couldn't have seen the way that things were going to go from the very beginning of seeing that house to how that house ended up, which was the most magnificent, amazing house. I couldn't have seen it. But if I would have kept letting the fear shut me down, keep letting the fear shut me down, then I wouldn't have ended up with this incredible house in Santa Fe. With that couldn't have had a better builder, because he was the most creative, inventive, like, stunning thing that you have ever seen built. And so I didn't let the fear shut me down. And so I just want you to think about how often that the pieces, you can't even quite see the pieces lining up in the moment. And so you shut it down and you don't go for it because it seems impossible at the moment. At 28 or whatever I was when that happened, it would have seemed impossible. It should have seemed impossible for me to do what I did. And yet there was like a knowing beyond knowing that that was what I was supposed to do. It was that part of myself that was connected to my higher self that knew that that property was supposed to be mine. I'm so glad, Margie. I adore you, and thank you for saying that. And so that property lit up my life, and it also lit up the partner at the time that my partner's life. Like, that was a masterpiece for him that he always talks about. And so that was co-created. It was destined. It was supposed to happen. So when you start to feel fear, there's a few types of fear that we feel. The first type of fear is fear that like is going to keep us safe, right? It is like that primal energy of like, something is happening that I need to be aware of because I either need to fight, flee, or freeze, right? Hopefully the fight or fight, the flee, blah, 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 the flight or the fight. That still didn't come out well. So that is like that primal energy fear that we are meant to have. But if it is not that fear, then no other fear is a no. It is never a no. It's never telling you not to do something. It's just telling you maybe to assess it a little bit more, or it is telling you to get back into your path, that you are not totally aligned in your path, because your higher self is never feeling fear. Your higher self is always feeling peace, love, joy, excitement. And so fear is just to tell you to like keep coming back on your path. And so if I would have listened to my fear and said, my fear is telling me that this house is not meant to be, then I would never have had that experience of building a house and living in a home that was just stunning and amazing. So I hope this is making sense to you all, because this is so important, because it is the thing that keeps us out of our alignment the most. It keeps us out of doing the thing that our heart desires the most. Think about whether it's something in your business, whether it's something in your life, whether it's like leaving somebody in your life that you should be leaving, or blocking you from finding somebody that you should be finding, or getting on a Facebook Live even, whatever. It's just information. And the only time that it should be really holding you back from doing something that you want to do is if it's that primal energy. That is like there is something dangerous in your environment and you need to be doing something about it. But that's the only time that fear should be like telling you not to do something. It's just information to come back into alignment, to come back onto your path. So hopefully this is making sense. So again, the first part of how to like start widening that gap between when the desire starts to bubble up and then when you start to do the shutdown is to be in the desire, to keep coming back to the desire as much as possible and being in it as long as possible. And this is hard. Like, this is not easy. It's so easy to feel the desire and it's so easy to go into shutdown, and it's really hard to really hold the desire for long amounts of time because the gloomy FM or the reality FM or the stories come in really quickly. And then the second way to start widening that gap is to break down things into digestible pieces. Break things down into digestible pieces, because oftentimes when we start looking into the future, like let's say you want to increase your business and you want to have, I'm just going to go like big to make the point. You want to have $1 million business, right? And it would be really easy to go into the story of like, holy shit, I need to do so many freaking things in order to actually get to $1 million business. And so we go into overwhelm and then we go into shutdown and we have all of these stories of how many things we have to get to. So first, just get one client and then maybe have a small gathering or a retreat. Or so break it down into smaller pieces, just like I did with the house. First, I had to buy the house, and then I had to find a builder. And then I had to go to Home Depot and find some things at the store. And then if I would have kept thinking all the time about all of the things that I had to do in order to make that house livable, in order to be like sitting on my couch, like in a finished home, I never would have done it because it would have just been too much. I would have just gone into the shutdown. And so break it down into smaller pieces. So be in the desire as much as possible and then break it down into smaller pieces. You can still hold the vision of what it will feel like. I still kept holding the vision of what it would feel like to be sitting on the couch in my finished home. But I didn't let my mind keep going into all the millions of things to get me there. It was just like, what's the one thing that I can do today that will get me closer to that finished product or that finished desire? So hopefully that makes sense. So for this next week, just continue to practice. Like, notice when your desire comes and notice, be really, really conscious and aware of when that shutdown wants to happen, because it's going to want it. It's going to happen. Like, it's going to want to happen. And so the way that you start shifting that is to just come back to the desire. Come back to the desire. And what's one thing? What can I do next? What's the one thing, what's one small digestible chunk that I can do next to get me one step closer to that desire? Because that keeps you out of the safe problems and the overwhelm, and it keeps you out of the shutdown. So let me know if you have questions. I'm going to try and go back and see what you guys were saying. So Margie, you were saying that sometimes the outside circumstances are kind of what tends to shut you down also, rather than your own mind. And yes, so outside things can definitely come in, right? Like that builder took off on me. That builder completely took off on me. That wasn't my mind saying I shouldn't do this. It was an outside circumstance that came in, and oftentimes those outside circumstances can be abundance limits as well. Like things that when we really start to like expand and grow, there's literally things in our outside that we co-create with our outside that literally kind of tries to put a ceiling on us. And so if I'm sure that let me know, drop a 2 in there if you have experienced this before, where I just had another client that she's just about to launch a funnel sequence with a freebie, and she the day that she was supposed to turn it into me, she got ridiculously sick, like ridiculously sick, just on exactly at that time. And so same thing as you and I, Margie, I know that you are like in huge expansion mode. As you start expanding, there are literally things in your outside environment that are gonna start happening to keep trying to make you small. And I know that is like one story that you often tell yourself on a regular basis, that you don't have enough time, and there are things in your life that keep you from expanding. And so some of it is just noticing where that is, because those are gonna keep coming. That's when people in your life might get sick that you need to take care of, like your parents or something, or you get sick, or there's a ton of abundance limits that start to happen. So just notice the ones that begin to happen, and even start changing your language around that, and start having some affirmations around just trying to shift those abundance limits as they come up. Hi, Mayuko. And let me know if that makes sense, if you have another question there. Hi, Nancy. And Kevin, the fear of hurting someone, I lost where that came in. I think it was when I was talking about, I don't know if you have a question around that, or if you were just saying that that's one of your personal fears, if you want to add to that. I think it was when I was saying that that the only time fear is like a no is when it's really a primal energy of trying to keep ourselves safe. But our fear of I know fear of hurting someone is often one that I have, and often the one that I hear the most, of not wanting to do things because we're scared of the impact that it might have on somebody else. And I don't know, if Kevin, if that's what you're speaking to. But the more that we can stay aligned with what as an impediment to fulfilling desire. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a huge one for a lot of people. And I was just having a conversation about this the other day, actually, about joy, how I don't feel like I deserve things when other people are hurting in the world, or if I do something, maybe if I'm my brightest self, maybe somebody else is gonna feel small then, or it's gonna hurt somebody. And I don't know if this is exactly what you're speaking of, but this is a really important piece, because we need to keep being our brightest self, because the more that we keep staying aligned and in our dharma and doing the things that we are supposed to do and following our heart's desire, the brighter that we are, and then we start entraining others to us. That has a ripple effect. The brighter I am, that hopefully creates inspiration and brightness in another, which hopefully creates inspiration and brightness in another. And that has a ripple effect that keeps going and going and going. And so as the more that we can stay in alignment to that, the better. Specifically leaving someone. Yes, that is always challenging. And it's so hard on here because I really wish I could have a conversation with you, Kevin, so I knew exactly. It's sometimes I feel on here like I'm texting with somebody and I'm trying to put my interpretation on what you are saying. But yes, definitely leaving somebody is scary and challenging and hard to stay out of fear when that is happening. But again, it's coming back into that alignment piece of knowing and knowing that that is the true place for you, and that if you do what is true for you, then that is like that also puts a ripple on everything around you. Yeah, Kevin, I know. So does anybody else have any questions about fear or any other piece around those pieces? And if not, just definitely throw them. If you think of other things, throw them in the comments and I will come back in. But again, I just wanted to speak to this today because it feels like it's such a big piece. And I know, like, and I'm speaking from personal experience, because on a daily basis or a weekly basis, there's constantly things that are coming up that I feel scared about and that I like have resistance. And when we are in resistance, then we are not in the flow. And when we are in fear, usually we're in resistance. And so trying to decrease that resistance by really being in your desire and taking digestible steps towards your desire. So thank you all so much for being on today and for coming to the third session of Badass Soul Session. Again, I'm sorry that I wasn't here yesterday right at 2. Excuse me. I ended up getting I was on a wait list for a doctor that I've been trying to get into for like 7 months, and a space opened up, and so I had to grab it. So I apologize for not being here yesterday. You are so welcome. I love you all tons, and I will see you all next week. Have a beautiful day. Thanks.